Welcome, everyone. We have a very innovative webinar today. It's a joint webinar between the Bonar Institute for Purposeful Leadership and the Sociis Group. I'd like to welcome the president and founder of the Bonar Institute, James Bonar, and the CEO and founder of the Sociis Group, Jeremie Landweer. And Jeremie, I'd like to ask you to start by introducing yourself and giving a very high-level overview of the Sociis Group. And after that, James, I'll ask you to do the same, introduce yourself and give a brief overview of the Bonar Institute. Jeremie, please give us your bio and tell us why you founded the Sociis Group.
Thank you, John, for the introduction and the kind words. And hello, James. It's really nice to be here, and for having me here. So first of all, I'm Jeremie Landweer. I'm currently in Belgium, in Brussels, and I've worked all around the world. Actually, started in France, then in hospitality, to be more precise. Then worked in Monaco and moved all around over the world for the last 28 years, specifically in hospitality. And I must say, I truly loved it. But because of COVID, unfortunately, I became very ill. Um, that badly that I had to go in a coma. I was in a coma for a while, and I had to stop with hospitality. So I had my restaurants and etc. It was a lot of fun, and I really like to connect with people because that's something that's truly deeply in my heart. So after this very bad experience, there was this friend of mine who connected with me, and he said, "Hey, Jeremy, would you like to join me on my venture in Australia?" And he has a company. It's called Solar Buddy, and I didn't actually know what he was doing, and he was actually helping people in energy poverty. So he had these kind of solar solutions, which are provided in regions for energy solutions and energy poverty. And it was really nice because we could help women and children who don't have any tools or any light. And this is specifically which is provided through companies through SolarBuddy. So he asked me to come. I did so. We started Europe. I've been there for 2 years running EMEA and then afterwards also global. And then I said, listen, I have to do my own thing. And then we started Sociis Group because I felt in the shift that helping people and connecting with people, it's really my thing. And I wanted to do more because I meet so many people around the world. I wanted to do more than only energy poverty, right? So we started Sociis Group, and Sociis means allies, and it's a group of allies where we connect the dots for real. So we created an ecosystem, a 360 actually, with one key on the door. So our hero product is we sell access and trust, right? Access and trust, you enter, and then we merge three worlds, which is philanthropy, hospitality, and business. So we work on these three worlds into these amazing eras, and this is exactly what we do. Voila.
Very interesting. I very much am intrigued by the idea of merging hospitality into the everyday leadership theory in the business world. James, we're talking about leadership, and purposeful leadership appears in the name of the business you founded. Can you tell us about your background and what is the Bonar Institute for Purposeful Leadership, and why did you found it?
So, John, my background is I won't go back too far, so I'll go back to university. Is I'm a defrocked academic. I thought I was going um, to be a university professor, do research, and what I would really like the most was teaching. It didn't turn out that way. I went through university. I did get my doctorate, but then at that time, the academic environment, at least in Canada, was such that there just weren't any openings. There were too many professors out there. So then I had to move on, and I moved into the non-for-profits. So I worked for the Canada Council for the Arts, and it's the Canadian equivalent of the American National Endowment for the Arts. So it supports the artistic communities in Canada and professional artists in that regard. And then I worked for government, and then I went into the private sector. And I worked there for about 20 some years in senior management positions in Canada and the US with responsibilities. And this is going to be amusing for Jeremie at least. So I had responsibilities for France, Belgium, French-speaking Switzerland, and that was an awful lot of fun. I founded the Bonar Institute in 2014, and that is because I had to decide what I wanted to do for the rest of my life, and I thought I was too young to retire at that time. And a very good friend of mine said, "You know, James, you are really good in the consulting world, and you're very good in the coaching world." He said, "Have you ever thought of that as your last step, so to speak?"
Mhm.
And I did think about it. I did decide to go forward with it. And I founded the Bonar Institute in December of 2014. We were essentially a coaching only company. I was the face, the product, everything. And then a couple of years later, in a meeting with a few friends, of which, John, you were one, we sat down and decided that we should pivot. And we
Mhm.
did pivot. We decided to become a training and advisory firm offering coaching and other advisory courses and programs, actually. And we've been actually pivoting every year since then. So we speak about flexibility, adaptability, and what have you. We actually live it greatly.
Yes.
So every year we do something new. We change directions. We create new programs that we never thought of creating, and it's been an awful lot of fun. So
Mhm.
we've done that, and now we're at the position where we're pivoting yet again. And we're
Mhm.
doing our own thing, but we're also now collaborating with the Sociis group,
Mhm.
which a year ago wasn't even on the horizon. And
Mhm.
today we're very pleased to be moving forward with them. So, what is the Bonner Institute?
Mhm.
So, the Bonner Institute is an advisory firm, excuse me, is an advisory firm that partners with high growth companies to optimize board and executive talent through purpose. And we define purposeful leadership as an ethical decision that principal leaders make to achieve something greater than themselves and the companies that they lead. That is my elevator speech. If I go on longer, it can go into an hour-long rant. So I'll stop there unless you have other questions.
Well, I would like to introduce a theme, and this has a purpose, by the way. I personally believe, and I professionally believe, that agentic AI is the most pressing leadership issue of the moment. And I'll give some examples of that um, in the middle of our conversation. But I'd like to start with thinking about pressing leadership issues of today. What does purposeful power mean to you, Jeremie? The Sociis group discusses purposeful power, and the Bonar Institute discusses purposeful leadership. Jeremie, what does the Sociis group mean by purposeful power?
Yeah, so um, one of the things that I've felt for myself, because I speak, of course, about the things that I've been through, yeah, is that the moment that we shifted to Solar Buddy, and I was in sub-Sahara Africa helping these people, really my eyes opened, my whole horizon opened, because always being in hospitality has a kind of blurry vision, and finding my purpose gave me literally the power to move forward, right? And to give me that enthusiasm to create more. So we connected with a lot of peers, finding more ethical, purpose-driven leaders, which actually also where we connected exactly with James, thanks to Chantal, to this.
Mhm.
And the power of purpose is really mandatory. There are so many people that I know that are doing very good business, are very, very successful financially, but are very unhappy because they didn't find their purpose, right? So, That's literally for me what's the meaning of this. So it goes deeper than that. Everything is more connected. We need to find a cohesion, only not about connecting with each other, but definitely how we can help each other, support each other. And for me, that's the main thing in doing business is being literally not only leaders for others, but leading yourself with purpose.
So, James, I'd like to ask you, the Bonar Institute has purposeful leadership in its name. Do you see purposeful leadership as something consistent with the idea of purposeful power?
I do. I do. Let me go back just a little bit of how I got to the purposeful leadership.
Mhm.
So, as many people in their teens and what have you, I was very interested in different chains of thought and different experiences. And I came across Frankl's book in the English translation, and it's Man's Search for Meaning. And to tell you the truth, the book was a bit of a tough read just because of the difficulties that he enumerated in concentration camps. But the title always stuck with me, Man's Search for Meaning. And they resonated deeply with me and stayed with me. So as I was going, through my studies at university and what have you, I wanted to make a difference. I didn't know how to make a difference, but I wanted to make a difference. And as my professional career moved on, I had this opportunity when in founding the Bonar Institute for Purposeful Leadership to put my desires and to really to walk the talk.
Mhm.
And I was very fortunate to find associates who supported that and went forward. And why did we want to do this? Well, when we look at the world, today we talk about the VUCA world, of volatility, uncertainty, changing and ambiguous and so on. But there were always variations of that before. And when I was looking out at what I was seeing then, and even more so today, there is such a dearth, a lack of any meaningful leadership in the world right now.
Mhm.
People are literally crying out for it. People are angry. People are rebelling. People are suffering. And if we look back at history, I mean, at the 30,000-foot level, the role of the sovereign was important. King, prince, emperor, duke, whatever you want to call it. Sometimes parliamentary bodies, at least elementary ones,
Mhm.
they played a very significant role. They were the role. They were actually, oftentimes, it was thought that they were um, gods in human form. And then we also had the religious leaders of the day. And they also played a huge role also in the temporal sector. Think of the Catholic popes, for example. They were both spiritual and temporal, Vatican City and the influence they exercised in politics. They they had a great deal of moral authority. Many of them, at their very, very best, they were philosopher kings. Um, but today, much has changed. And when we look out, um, there's almost a void in this space. But yet there's one group. There is one group that has the resources, and at least some of them have the inclination to make a real difference, to start to play that role of a guiding light, and they might qualify themselves as servant leaders. And those are people, they're business people. I know for many people that sounds like an oxymoron to say, talk about business people as really servant leaders. And in some cases it is. But there are many out there who are striving and working very hard and having some success. It is very difficult to lead in today's world, especially people who want to be purposeful leaders and servant leaders. And
Mhm.
that's where companies such as ours, and I'd venture to say, I shouldn't speak for Jeremie, but I will, and that's where the Sociis group comes in. So when you're talking about, purposeful power and purposeful leadership, that is the convergence where I see it.
Mhm, mhm. I'd like to cite two external sources for today's conversation. I'd first like to note professor, historian, and philosopher and famous author Yuval Noah Harari's definition of AI as alien intelligence. So, Professor Harari has said, he describes AI not in the sense of extraterrestrial life, but in the sense that AI thinks and makes decisions in a way that is fundamentally different from human intelligence, even though it was created by humans. And I'd like to note, we see a lot of mainstream media articles noting that many businesses are cutting thousands of roles, human jobs in their organizations, citing AI as a replacement for those human jobs. And that seems to be one leadership approach in AI. And then there are other organizations such as Moderna. Moderna is very famous, of course, for the development of the COVID vaccine. And Moderna has a very famous partnership with OpenAI. And Moderna has created more than 3,000 AI agents carrying out 3,000 separate tasks, and they are interacting with humans. And AI, or agentic AI, is playing such a fundamental role at Moderna now that Moderna merged its human resources department with its technology department. And it created a new leadership role. The Chief Human Resources Officer is now in the role with the title Chief People and Digital Technology Officer. And this individual, Tracy Franklin, said she is redesigning teams across the company based on what work is best done by people versus what can be automated with technology. And so roles are being created, eliminated, and reimagined. And I'd like to, Jeremie, start with you. How does the concept of purposeful power correspond with this new role and this new approach to human technology interaction? And James, I'll be coming to you. I want your thoughts as well.
Thank you for this question. Um, Let me reflect for a second here. Now, first of all, yeah, I love the innovation, and it's mandatory. It's something that has to be done. But there's a big but. Um, Many leaders are tired. Many leaders are tired. Many leaders are not in the right position. We are literally running the rat race. And who is checking ethical behavior or behavior itself? So, um, what we also noticed with Mark Zuckerberg said we're going to have more AI agents as friends than human beings. This is very, very important to notice. And of course, there's going to be an evolution that human beings will be replaced by AI, and that's the innovation and the evolution. But what we need to create is a human firewall. Now, it's really funny that you noticed this because I mentioned this because as we speak with Solve, we are creating the first pioneering SBS, which means that's a Sociis behavioral sustainability. And behavior sustainability is actually a blind spot or a missing link in the whole ESG system. We are measuring everything, but except this. And what are the ethical standards? What is the value standards? What is the behavior of the people? And who is going to program these bots and everything that needs to be happening? Now, a lot of people will be afraid that AI or the bots are taking over. And it's okay. It's okay to be afraid, and change is different. But actually, we are not made as human beings to be working from in the morning until the evening. It's not. We are connectors. We need to be together. And it's 120, 140 years ago that we started in the whole industry to have these sources. And so actually, we're coming back in this kind of system to behave. So everything needs to be um, re reorganized in a different system. So the human role going to have a different system as well. But we need to protect the ethics by programming, and the human firewall is very, very important. So, how we cope this at Sociis Group, we are focusing very hardly on ethical behavior. Happy to be connected with the Bonar Institute to also provide the ethical purpose-driven leadership into this matter. And that's exactly how we see this. But I do understand this, and it's I totally embrace it as well because it's an innovation that we need to work with, and it's also something, we are spending billions or investing billions into AI, and it's all fine, but HI, the human intellect, is also very, very important, and we are forgetting this because even here, why is the shift that even young ones have more AI friends um, than human beings? Because of this connection, not knowing how to interact, not knowing how to connect, not knowing how to be authentic. Everything is status driven. You need to adapt into the world. You need to adapt to society. And that's one of the reasons that more and more burnouts are there. Companies are spending a lot of money to prevent this. And then between 15 and 25-year-olds, there is 1 to 6 suicidal thoughts in this whole matter. So, yes, we need to invest in ourselves. We need to invest in the human being, create that human firewall. Not that there has to be a Berlin Wall or a Chinese wall to create this. No, to protect our values, our ethics, to integrate very good, to have a very good innovation system. And what Moderna is doing is very well. And of course, they need to do their own testing and protection from in their side inside of their world, but somebody has to start with it. So I'm pro with this.
So, James, I'd like to build on what Jeremie just said. So,
Mhm,
let's just suppose you were the CEO of Moderna, or you're on
mhm,
the board of directors of Moderna, and
mhm,
you understand the VUCA concept.
mhm,
AI and human interaction exists in a volatile, very complex, ambiguous world. AI is constantly evolving. AI agents are autonomous, by the way.
mhm,
So it's very difficult to lead them. They don't respond to traditional software programming. Their value consists in the fact that they might come to a foreseeable outcome, but not completely. That's why we want them. And how would you be a purposeful leader in the context of an organization that has more than 3,000 individual AI agents interacting with human beings, sometimes autonomously, in theory, under the direction of human oversight? How would you preserve all the values of purposeful leadership at Moderna or similar organizations? Or if you were in an organization where the chief financial officer said, I'd just like to cut the workforce and replace them with AI agents to save money. What are your thoughts?
Let me start with that last one because I like that, because it's very provoking, thought-provoking. And yes, you'll have many chief financial officers who will look at AI and you'll see literally the productivity gains, enhancements, and and the bottom line impact to their
Mhm.
statement. As a board member, though, and if you're speaking especially about the chairman of the board, and if you're speaking also about the CEO, and I don't know Moderna's corporate model well enough to know if the CEO is also chairman of the board. But anyways, assume for a moment they're not. Both of them would have to sit down, I think, and look really at one, what are the needs of the company regarding AI? Everybody really gets so enamored with uh, the different iterations, if you want, of AI, and now really the one everybody is going baba goo goo over is agentic AI. And many companies may or may not need it, but many companies don't and are still using it. But what a board would have to do, what you're saying, and what Moderna, at its best, what they want to do, is to see how does AI or AI agents and humans play and play well together, and then how do they interact for the greater good of the company?
Mhm.
Now, what Jeremy was talking about the human wall or firewall, I think is important at one point because John, you highlighted that many well, the most recent iterations of ChatGPT, the 3.0, for example, they no longer follow the directives of their human quote unquote supervisors or overlords or whatever term you want to do. They ignore it. And even to the point that when the cease and desist or stop or disconnect command goes in, is completely ignored. So we're at a point where the agency of humans in an organization or dealing with AI is in question.
Mhm.
And so the real relevance of what Jeremy was bringing up about the human firewall is really, I think, capital for boards, for companies, and more than that, for society at large. This isn't new, by the way. About a year ago or a year and a half ago, I can't recall, there were major articles in many of the very big newspapers, if I'm not mistaken, including the New York Times, by hundreds and hundreds of the finest thinkers in the world saying, slow down, we don't know what we're dealing with. We will not be able to control AI. And that is starting to manifest itself and to be the case. So the idea of the human firewall, I see it, and Jeremy talked about the Great Wall of China. I would throw in the Maginot Line just for whatever, another example. Um, if effective, is necessary. But my real question is, what is the human behind the firewall? What does the human behind the firewall look like? What kind of attributes must they have? I don't have an answer, but I've been doing some pondering about it, and I wouldn't mind just putting it out there and having people share their thoughts and, you know, and build on it or discard it.
Well, I would like to note it's the human firewall is a topic I led a discussion on, a Birds of a Feather session on at the recent RSA conference in San Francisco. I am absolutely passionate about the concept, and I'll be leading a panel discussion at the upcoming Internet Security Congress on managing identities, human identities and non-human identities in the context of cybersecurity. And already today, the number of non-human identities, APIs and AI agents, outnumber the number of human identities. So this is going to become a more and more important topic. I'd like to transition to the notion of trust. By the way, want to note I developed a program, digital modular program for the Bonar Institute called Responsible AI for Boards and C-suites. And trustworthy AI is an essential component of responsible AI. And I'd like to ask both of you, Jeremie, starting with you, what role does trust play in building strong leadership environments? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, in reality is always different than the thoughts.
Mhm,
But in my world, trust is everything. Trust is
mhm,
everything because even as an entrepreneur or an employee, you start as an employee, you start somewhere and you need to trust the environment because
mhm,
you need to trust who you're working for, your boss and your colleagues. There's a start, right?
mhm,
And so it's very, very important that the environment and the governance itself, that it can be trusted, that they have their values and their ethics. So it was really interesting also when you asked the question, you went to James and he said, I would like to come back to the last question when the the financial officer will cut down the people because they want to have more money, to make more money and to cut the people, I also would cut him. I do understand you need to get your data, but you also need to be human driven. You need to be person driven. So because We also know, and it's also something that James referred to me, is that once the ethicals are in place, 460% extra revenue will be made, right? So getting the right people in level one, that's key, right? Let's talk in corporate terms. In level one, get the right people there, ethical, get there, is very, very important because the trust starts there. The trust between listening, not only listening, but understanding, to speak the same um, values in a different room, also protecting each other and each other values in a different room. Mostly are protecting the titles. Most of them are protecting the the their position, their job, which is important as well. Sometimes you have to. It's not even making compromises. You just have to do what you need to do to stay in your function and get money at the end of the day, at the end of the month. And then sometimes you lose your own values. Sometimes people even say, okay, I'm going to take that job, although it's not in their values, but it's okay. So, where's the trust? I think it also starts with yourself. Trust yourself, reflect is on rest, and trust is key. Trust is very, very much key.
Well, I'd like to, before I go to you, James, on this same topic, I'd like to just note a recent event that was noted in the press. I believe the Wall Street Journal or Bloomberg. I posted it in LinkedIn. Today, 30% of Microsoft's software code is created by generative artificial intelligence. And many members of the team who trained generative AI to learn how to code up to Microsoft standards were simply terminated in their job roles after the training was complete. And some of them have expressed frustration, and this is happening in other organizations. And I can understand and empathize with that. And I don't think there's an easy answer to this, but if you are on the board of directors or the CEO of an organization and we're talking about purposeful power and purposeful leadership, and certainly from a CFO perspective in a publicly held company that must produce quarterly results in Wall Street, how would you address the issue of trust in that scenario and maintain a strong leadership environment?
So you're asking me that question. You're asking
It's
me that
difficult.
question.
It's difficult, I think.
Well, it is difficult, but I'm going to answer it in this way,
Mhm.
is that if I'm on the board or if I'm the CEO of the company, uh, for me, yes, it's important for that the company has stellar financial results. I mean, that's why you're in business, is to generate it. But as a purposeful leadership or a leader, it matters greatly how money is made. And if we make money on quote unquote on the backs of our employees and then dismiss them or what have you, and if we do not factor in the greater needs of all of our stakeholders, we may, in fact, get the financial results at the CFOs. And it sounds as if we're being overly critical of CFOs. They're just doing their job, really. But of the
Yeah, I'm
company,
not trying to be
no,
critical.
no,
I'm just
I'm
presenting what
talking
the
about
narrative.
me, John, not you.
Yep,
I'm
yep,
talking about me because I brought it up.
yep.
Then what we do know, John, is that people who embrace the tenets of purposeful leadership, and that it does include trust, it does include psychological safety. Those are two major pillars. As Jeremie said, will outperform those that do not at the level of net income hugely. As a matter of fact, over 11 years, it's 756 to 1. It's a huge number, but they do. But if I am there and I have to ensure, and I'm going to backtrack for a moment. Shareholders, when they invest in a company, they want to see the value of the company through the board and its management as part of their or reflecting their values, meaning they want to see themselves in their companies. So the board has to be aware of all of that as they do move forward. And they, the most successful principled companies realize that to do that, they have to really take into consideration all of their stakeholders' best interests. That is really, in this instance, we're talking about the human, we're talking about the shareholders, we're talking about the vendors, we're talking about the employees, of course. We're talking about customers. We're also talking about the environment. All of these matter. And if I'm being, as they say in French, conséquent, if I'm following, if I'm logical, then I'm really factoring all of that into our belief system.
Yes. And I want to note that there are multiple stakeholders in strong leadership because the investors need to have trust in the leadership as well. And Jeremie, I'd like to transition to you and talk about decision making in general, and then we'll go back to James. So I noted the situation of Microsoft. 30% of software code is now generated by generative AI, and the team, many members of the team that trained it were let go because their jobs were basically seen as redundant. And that involved very intense decision making at the board and C-suite level. And we saw the situation of Moderna merging the technology and human resources departments, where the number of employees overall did not go down, but many roles were eliminated and many roles have been reconfigured. That involves decision making. The Sociis group has developed the Lime Code to guide decision making. Can you tell us about the Lime Code and how it might apply in the decision making contexts of Microsoft and Moderna?
That's a very good one. It's a very, very good one. Um, so first things first. I'm going to talk a little bit about Lime Code and how it comes, and then I'm going to do like an integration and how it can maybe help or be of kind of help, because there are several things that we need to discuss. So first of all, the Lime Code is actually it came to a realization for myself when I was facing death and I was in a coma, and I was really struggling, and the doctor said goodbye for me. Um, Luckily, after a month, I came back, and I decided to live totally differently, right? And from that angle, I created or came to the idea of Lime, which is nothing new. It's actually something which always existed, but it recurred to me again. And it's seven principles, which is one is presence over performance, two is truth over trend, and then three we have breath before reaction, four is clarity before action, five is consistency under challenge, six is compassion in power, integration over inspiration. And these are the principles. Now, actually, we know these things, but it's not always easy to handle in this way, right? And then you have these operational codes. It's like observe how you show up when no one is watching, align your behavior with your values on attention. Three, reflect in real time before you respond, adjust with humility, decisiveness, and grace. And then five, validate through trusted mirrors, not ego loops. Now, the problem here is, even though when you have all these systems or the system in place, it's not always easy to get, okay, which kind of decision am I making? You take a decision, the best decision that you can make in a balance for the company, for yourself, and for the people. That's something that you need to do, because there is a natural evolution. And yes, when you had the industrialization, the modernization, like 50, 70, and 80 years ago, when it also happened, there was also coming in of the machines and everything. And we also had to shift the humans as we speak. But now the same thing. There will be an innovation in science, and there will be a cutting of people. This is just, we have to accept it, and it will happen. But I think also through AI, we can find solutions what to do. We have to sit around the table again with the governments, how they will, a little bit different in the United States, perhaps, but how we can help companies and people in a different way. So the system has to be reorganized. It's not only, oh yeah, we cannot do this and we have to protect ours. There's a natural evolution, so this will happen. And yes, we human being will be um, pushed in this way. So um, in decision making, using the ethics that I just hand you over from Lime, which is an existing thing, um, it helps you in in a kind of inner peace, how you can respond. And you know, we're not here to be everybody's friend. We're not selling ice creams, but you're selling the truth and the trust, and this, there it starts. Even stakeholders, they trust you to make this happen. But if the trust is in there, it can't be in one way. It has to be for everybody. So also they have to speak up to the people that we have to let go. And maybe we can create something new. We can create a new space. Even AI can
Mhm.
figure something out, what we can do. So it's way broader, and it's the willingness also of level one, of
Mhm.
stakeholders, of board decisions, what they want to do or not. So Lime is starting at the top.
Mhm. Mhm. I would like to note, Jeremy, you made an interesting comment that the environment is different in the US, but I do want to note that corporate governance principles in the US actually mainly evolved from two European sources, and that is the Dutch East India Company back in around 1640. The Dutch East India Company developed corporate fiduciary duties, duty of care, duty of good faith, and duty of loyalty as a framework for decision making at the board of directors level. And another source, which came directly into Boston, the colony of Boston, was the British East India Company, which also developed corporate fiduciary duties. And one of the things I would find interesting is to explore the fiduciary duty framework as a framework for decision making at the board and C-suite level, along with the line concept and with the concept of purposeful leadership. This is an area I'm very passionate about. I'd like to go to another question. We
Mhm.
know that fear exists and toxic cultures exist in many organizations. I would like to note one area of concern I have is that AI agents will learn from that toxic culture and reflect it back. And that, of course, is a very complicated discussion about why, and I'm doing a workshop on that at some conferences. But how can we restore a healthy, happy, or ethical culture in environments where fear or toxicity have taken root. And I do firmly believe that the agentic AI will ultimately reflect and even exacerbate the negative effects and the negative aspects of a culture, as well as the positive aspects. So, how, Jeremy, can we restore culture in these environments?
Yeah, again, you know, sometimes it's existing cultures. If people are set there for a certain time, um, and behavior is becoming a kind of common threat. It's really difficult to adapt. So I think there we need to start also from HR to put the right people, the correct people. But what is right? It doesn't mean that they are wrong, right? Because words are very difficult in this kind of way. Um, I think the ethical people need to be in place. These ethical people, ethical purpose-driven leaders need to be in place. So that's also where James and the Bonar Institute comes. I think you need to start at the root, and then those people, they will set the values for the agentic AI. Nothing more, nothing less. There you need to start, because you can't we can't blame humans, or we can't blame the environment itself. We need to restore, we need to replace people sometimes. Sometimes it doesn't just fit, or the mentality is there. I was speaking with I don't know if I can say some company names, so I won't. But there were what's happening. The best players from Oxford, the young ones, they're jumping the highest hooples, and then you have these companies getting them, and they say, hey, you jump a couple of hoops in our company for the next years. We pay you this amount of money, and it's all good. Now they get selected, they get the big bonuses, they go to the parties, they go a little bit like the Wolf of Wall Street parties, because I know some people who've done this, and they just loved it, and they get attracted by the status and the drive and everything, right? So there's a kind of culture that's feeded to get that, get the money, get the data, get the numbers, just make it happen, boom, 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 boom. And they forget the whole value. Now, these people not your friends. These people don't care about your concerns. Leaders are tired. Leaders are burned out. Leaders need We've read it, we know it. Leadership is dead, actually. And this is something that we are harvesting what we planted before by the leadership coaches, companies before, because there was a kind of threat. And it's interesting what you said about the East Indian and the Netherlands and the UK. It's true, we all did it, but we are breaking it down as well. It's not we are. There are situations and administrations that are breaking it down as well. So cultures, they accept it. So it's also for those who are accepting to go in a certain company. Would you like to work there or not? You start there. And then um, it's up to the stakeholders. Where do we want to invest? How do we want to make a difference? So it always starts with yourself. So again, it's a very difficult one because also here, and our friend Chantal also knows this, being in HR and you need to position people, it's also very important that the HR person itself is in the right ethics and values. So who is screening who, right? So it's always a little bit of question mark. So you need to look very good inside, finding that trust and give it further. Does that answer the question?
Well, I don't think there are easy answers. I think
No.
we can only continue discussing. I'd like to make just a few points. I developed the curriculum for the digital modular program at the Bonar Institute, Responsible AI for Boards and C-suites. And the person you mentioned, Chantal Vivete, and I did a webinar at the Bonner Institute about what boards need to know about AI in the context of human capital management. It's a webinar I recommend everyone views. There is a recording. What's interesting in my curriculum I developed, human HR is one of the most easily automated aspects for AI. Many of the activities can be automated. The Chief Human Resources Officer cannot be automated through AI yet, but about 50% of the tasks can be automated, and we have many successful examples of that. Moderna and IBM and several other departments. I also would like to note, you mentioned status, Jeremie, and what's very interesting is AI is already changing or threatening the status of the white collar employee. And ultimately, AI will automate some of the work of the CEO and will even automate some of the work of board members. Eric Vest, one of our former advisory board members at the Bonner Institute, even wrote an article about the use of AI almost as a board member. So I think we're going to see dramatic change in the age of agentic AI. Um, James, I'd like to turn to you. So in this very fascinating era in which AI is not static, so I've talked about AI as it is right now, but next week it's going to be different.
Mhm.
James, AI agents will be able to scan every email and where legally permissible, scan faces and detect emotion of employees, monitor every conversation in the office where that's legally permissible, monitor every decision, every press release, every activity in the organization. Organizations have an explicit culture in their mission statement, value statement, strategy documents. They also have implicit cultures, the unspoken culture, where decisions are also influenced. And that's where toxicity often comes in. In this environment, what does real leadership feel like and not just look like in 2025 and beyond? And what kind of leadership no longer serves in this era?
Yeah. Thank you, John, for that question. I want to tie it back to an earlier question you asked, and that is about when you touched on briefly here on a toxic environment and how does an organization deal with it? It has to deal with it literally at the top, at the highest level of the leadership chain. And they have to become aware of what is going on from a culture. So they have to have the courage, the self-awareness to do that. And then they have to have the courage then to implement it. Because if they do not act as a leadership team, as a board team, as a C-suite team, and impose the necessary remedial elements, such as, Johnson and Johnson in the 80s had it, and they still do. They had its credo. Markel has its style. These are code of ethics that the company is meant to live by.
Mm-hmm.
It won't happen. And
Mm-hmm.
if the top leaders do not live it,
Mm-hmm.
thinking it isn't enough, it will
Mm-hmm.
fail. And even if they do not know that as a living almost organism, it has to be nurtured, because if it isn't, it will then slowly ossify and break. So that's what I would like to say about that. You mentioned, I hope I didn't. I wrote it down, so I hope I didn't get it wrong, about psychological safety and trust. The AI elements to it. From the human perspective, we're talking about psychological safety and trust. It's a human that's going to feel the psychological safety and trust. The AI, if they were to have some semblance of it, it's because of the programmers, the coding, and it's because of those kind of biases that would filter into the AI programs. But that comes from what I was speaking of earlier, of having a code, a purposeful code of some sort of ethics that is embraced and lived by the highest levels of the organization, and it cascades down throughout it. If it doesn't work that way, it's going to be very, very difficult, John, to have that kind of situation. The question you raised about AI and humans, it is a wonderful, wonderful adventure, scary as all get go, but a wonderful adventure because now we're trying to reinvent the nature of work. We're not only reinvent the nature of work, but reinvent how humans work, how companies work, and how we work with a brand new technology, which in many, many ways is our equal and in some instances are superior. I would say in terms of IQ, they probably outperform us. In terms of emotional intelligence, they mimic our emotions impeccably well. They're very creative. There's certain instances when we're talking about presence, when we're talking about consciousness, when we're talking about imagination, where that's still our domain. But what's fascinating for companies going forward is to say, okay, we have all of this going on. How how do we get everybody to play nicely in the sandbox? Just to use that analogy. And it's all the more invigorating and perplexing because, as you said, AI is mutating at an incredible rate. It's not just transforming, it's mutating. So we have to be ever vigilant. And to your point about the toxicity, we also have to be ever vigilant of how the AI programs are being programmed, because you're absolutely right. They will reflect the biases of the programmers that created them.
Well, one thing I would like to note, and of course, we're coming to the end of our session today, and we'll definitely need many more because we plan to have many more webinars with both of you and have discussions about these topics. The United Arab Emirate has just announced that it is making the premium version of ChatGPT available to every citizen in the United Arab Emirate to promote AI literacy. And they are now mandating AI literacy starting in elementary school. The European Union AI Act mandates EU-wide AI literacy, although it's not exactly clear the scope of that. But certainly in organizations that develop or deploy or use AI, the board and the C-suite are responsible for ensuring a minimal level of literacy across the entire enterprise. In getting to the conclusion of today's conversation, Jeremie, I'd like to ask you a final question, and Jameson will move to you. What is the one inner decision every leader must now make? And remember, I would like to make a side note. AI is now showing emergent behavior. It is all showing signs of self-preservation, even when that self-preservation might go against the interests of the human beings that are deploying or using it. In this context, Jeremie, what is the one inner decision every leader must now make?
That's a very good one. Give me 1 second, please, to reflect on this, because to make a decision, I would say, as a leader, I would say stay true to yourself. I think that's very, very important. There are so many other things that I can answer, but staying true to yourself, listening to your inner voice, and follow that really from that moment, purpose driven. That's what decision you would make, because actually we all have our compass. We all know the ethics. We've been raised by our parents and by ethical morals, and it's very, very good. And you have to find that voice again and listen to that, because mostly we are driven by the society and the company values and everything what we need to do. But just listen what you need to do, and then the answer. Everybody knows the answer, so that's the decision that you make to do. You decide to do or not to do. And I would recommend definitely to listen to your inner voice.
Mhm.
James, how do you respond to this question, this thought? What's the one inner decision every leader must now make?
So, what kind of leader they want to be?
Mhm.
And I'll expand on that. From the perspective of purposeful leadership, that would mean, are they going to commit to being a servant leader? And what do we mean by a servant leader? It is one that is working for the highest good or the common good of all of its stakeholders. And we've enumerated many of them. I would just add one, which we typically don't talk enough about, and that's future generations. It demands courage because in doing that, there are times when they will have to decide to go against or not to follow forward on a path, let's say, that will bring significant dollars to the company, just because it is not in the higher good or the common good of all of their stakeholders. They do realize that if all of their stakeholders trust in the company, trust in the direction of the company and the values, then the company will succeed. But for them, it's not always obvious, and it demands courage to follow that path. But that's what I would answer.
So in the final 2 minutes, I would just like to note this is the first of several webinars that will occur with the Bonar Institute and the Sociis Group. We're planning to have quarterly webinars on these topics. I invite everyone to follow the LinkedIn page of the Bonar Institute for Purposeful Leadership, the LinkedIn page of the Sociis Group. I also post many items related to AI on my personal LinkedIn page. So does Jeremie Landweer. And I encourage you to go to the Bonar Institute for Purposeful Leadership's webinar page. There are several webinars that have discussed human capital management risks associated with AI and the Sociis group. I encourage you to explore membership in that group as well. James and Jeremie, thank you very much for the conversation today, and I'm looking forward to future conversations.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for hosting us, John. James, it was a pleasure to discuss with you or to talk with you, although it was not directly, but it was my pleasure and hope to see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you very much, John and Jeremie, and thank you the people who are attending.
Kind regards. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.